In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. The tragedy of Karbala did not end with the setting sun on the 10th of Muharram. While history remembers the battlefield, the sacrifices, and the bravery that shook the hearts of generations, there is another chapter that is often spoken about less. A chapter filled with pain, patience, courage, and unwavering faith. What happened on the 11th of Muharram was not merely the continuation of a historical event. It was the beginning of a journey that would preserve the message of truth for centuries to come. The survivors carried wounds that words cannot fully describe, yet they also carried a legacy that no army could destroy and no oppression could erase. Their strength in the face of unimaginable hardship became a lesson for every generation that followed. As we reflect upon these events, we are reminded that while injustice may appear powerful for a moment, truth and sacrifice leave an impact that echoes throughout history. The events that unfolded after Karbala continue to teach us about patience, dignity, steadfastness, and trust in Allah even during the darkest moments of life. The morning of the 11th of Muharram in the year 61H arrived with a silence that carried the weight of a tragedy unlike any other in Islamic history. The battlefield of Karbala, which only a day earlier had witnessed courage, sacrifice, and unwavering faith, now stood covered with the signs of immense loss. The tents that had once been filled with the voices of family members, children, and companions were now surrounded by grief and sorrow. For those who survived the events of the 10th of Muharram, the night had been one of pain, uncertainty, and remembrance. The survivors included the women and children from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, along with a small number of individuals who had been unable to take part in the fighting due to illness or other circumstances. Among them was Ali ibn Hussein Zain al-Abidin, who was seriously ill during the battle, and therefore did not participate in the fighting. The responsibility of preserving the memory and message of Karbala would eventually rest heavily upon his shoulders and the shoulders of the surviving members of the household of the Prophet ﷺ. As the first light of dawn spread across the plains of Karbala, the reality of what had occurred became even more painful to witness. The families who had lost fathers, brothers, sons, and loved ones were now facing a future they had never imagined. The grief of losing someone dear is difficult under any circumstances. But the grief experienced on that morning was beyond ordinary human understanding. Yet even in such moments, the survivors displayed remarkable patience and dignity. Historical reports describe how the women and children remained steadfast, despite the overwhelming emotions surrounding them. Their strength came not from the absence of sorrow, but from their faith in Allah and their understanding that every soul belongs to Him and ultimately returns to Him. Throughout Islamic history, patience during trials has always been considered one of the greatest qualities of a believer, and the events after Karbala became one of the most powerful examples of this principle. The battlefield itself remained a painful reminder of the events of the previous day. The companions who had stood beside Hussein ibn Ali had fulfilled their promises with extraordinary loyalty and courage. Their sacrifices became symbols of commitment to principles, truth, and faith. Generations of Muslims would later remember not only their bravery in battle, but also their sincerity and devotion. For the surviving members of the family, the morning brought difficult moments as they prepared for what would come next. Their trials had not ended with the battle itself. In many ways, another chapter of hardship was only beginning. Yet history records that they carried themselves with remarkable composure and faith, refusing to allow grief to destroy their trust in Allah. One of the remarkable lessons from this period is the distinction between sadness and despair. Islam does not ask believers to suppress their emotions or pretend that pain does not exist. Even the prophets experienced sadness and grief. What Islam teaches is that grief should not lead to the loss of faith or hope in Allah's wisdom and mercy. The survivors of Karbala demonstrated this balance in a way that would inspire countless people throughout history. The events of that morning also remind us of the temporary nature of worldly power and worldly victories. History often shows that strength measured only by numbers or military success does not always determine how events will ultimately be remembered. Many years later, the names and sacrifices associated with Karbala continued to live in the hearts of millions, while many worldly achievements of the same era faded with time. For the children who survived, the experiences of those days would remain with them for the rest of their lives. Childhood is usually associated with safety and comfort, yet the children of Karbala witnessed events that no child should ever have to witness. Their resilience in the face of such hardship became another example of the strength that faith can provide, even during unimaginable circumstances. As preparations were made for the next stage of their journey, uncertainty surrounded the survivors. They did not know exactly what awaited them in the days ahead. They did not know where they would be taken or what challenges would come next. Yet they continued moving forward with patience and reliance upon Allah. This aspect of their experience speaks to something deeply human and timeless. Many people face periods in life when the future feels uncertain and the path ahead is unclear. The example of those who endured Karbala reminds believers that trust in Allah becomes most valuable during moments when certainty disappears. There is also an important lesson in remembering that history is not only shaped by those who fight battles, but also by those who preserve truth, share experiences, and carry memories forward to future generations. Had the survivors remained silent, much of what the world knows about Karbala might never have reached later generations. Their role in preserving and conveying these events became part of the legacy itself. The morning of the 11th of Muharram therefore marked more than the aftermath of a battle. It marked the beginning of a responsibility to preserve lessons that would continue inspiring people centuries later. It became a reminder that sacrifice for truth often carries influence far beyond the moment in which it occurs. Many people today continue to reflect upon Karbala not only as a historical event, but also as a source of spiritual and moral lessons. The values associated with patience, steadfastness, dignity, and faith continue to resonate across cultures and generations. Regardless of background or school of thought, Muslims throughout the world recognize Karbala as one of the most significant moments in Islamic history. The survivors who stood on the plains of Karbala on that morning had every reason to feel overwhelmed by grief and uncertainty. Yet they continued forward with remarkable courage and faith. Their example teaches that even when circumstances seem impossible, the believer can still hold firmly to patience and trust in Allah. Human beings may not always choose the trials that come into their lives, but they can choose how they respond to them. And the response shown by the survivors after Karbala became one of the most enduring examples of dignity during hardship in the entire history of Islam. The journey that began after Karbala was one of the most difficult and emotional chapters in Islamic history. The events of the battlefield had already left deep wounds upon the hearts of the surviving family members. But the trials they faced were far from over. As the morning of the 11th of Muharram unfolded, preparations were made to move the survivors away from Karbala. For the women and children, this was not simply a journey from one place to another. It was a journey filled with grief, uncertainty, exhaustion, and immense emotional pain. Imagine standing in a place where so many loved ones had just been lost, and then being required to leave that place behind without knowing where you would be taken or what would happen next. Every step away from Karbala must have carried memories of fathers, brothers, sons, and companions whose sacrifices had taken place only hours earlier. The sadness of departure was mixed with the anxiety of an uncertain future. Among the survivors were women who had displayed extraordinary patience throughout the ordeal. They carried not only their own grief, but also the responsibility of comforting frightened children who struggled to understand the events unfolding around them. Children naturally seek safety and reassurance from the adults around them. And despite their own pain, the elders among the family continued to provide strength and support to the younger members. One of the remarkable aspects of this journey was the dignity with which the survivors carried themselves despite the hardships they endured. History often remembers military victories and political achievements, but the endurance shown by those who survived Karbala became one of the most powerful examples of spiritual strength and resilience in Islamic history. Their patience under pressure demonstrated that true strength is not always found on the battlefield. Sometimes true strength is found in remaining firm when life becomes overwhelmingly difficult. As the caravan moved from Karbala, every mile brought new challenges. Travel during that era was physically demanding even under normal circumstances. Long distances, harsh weather conditions, and limited resources made journeys exhausting. For individuals already weakened by grief and trauma, these challenges became even greater. Yet despite everything they had experienced, they continued moving forward. There is an important lesson hidden within this part of history. Life does not always pause to allow us time to recover from one hardship before another arrives. Sometimes people find themselves carrying grief while still being required to fulfill responsibilities and continue their journey. Many people today can relate to this experience in different ways. A person may face loss while still needing to care for their family, continue working, or support others around them. The examples left behind by the survivors of Karbala remind us that human beings often possess strength they do not realize they have until circumstances require it. Throughout Islamic history, patience has never meant weakness or passivity. Patience means remaining steadfast without losing faith. It means continuing forward even when the path becomes painful. It means refusing to allow hardship to destroy trust in Allah's wisdom and mercy. The survivors embodied this understanding of patience in a way that continues to inspire people centuries later. The journey after Karbala also became a means through which the events themselves were preserved and remembered. Historical moments often survive because there are individuals willing to bear witness to them and carry their stories to future generations. The surviving members of the family became guardians of memories that would eventually reach Muslims across the world and throughout history. As they traveled, they carried with them not only personal grief but also an enormous responsibility. The message and lessons of Karbala needed to survive beyond the battlefield itself. The sacrifices that had been made could not be allowed to disappear into silence or be forgotten with the passing of time. In many ways, preserving these memories became part of their mission. This responsibility was not an easy one. Speaking about painful experiences requires courage. Remembering difficult moments often means reopening wounds that have not yet healed. Yet history shows that many important truths survive only because individuals are willing to carry these burdens despite the personal cost involved. The journey also highlighted the importance of family and community during times of hardship. During moments of crisis, people often discover that emotional support becomes just as important as physical necessities. Encouraging words, shared prayers, and simple acts of kindness can provide strength during periods when people feel overwhelmed by grief or fear. Many believers throughout history have found comfort in reflecting upon these events because they demonstrate that even the most righteous people experienced hardship and uncertainty. Difficulties are not necessarily signs of abandonment or punishment. Sometimes trials become opportunities for patience, growth, and spiritual elevation. The people associated with Karbala held some of the highest positions of honor in Islamic history, yet they still faced tests that challenged them in unimaginable ways. This understanding changes how believers view their own struggles. Instead of asking why difficulties exist, they begin asking how they can respond to those difficulties in ways that bring them closer to Allah. Hardship itself is not what defines a person. The response to hardship often becomes the true measure of character. The survivors also demonstrated remarkable courage in protecting and caring for one another throughout their journey. Leadership during times of comfort can be relatively easy, but leadership during moments of fear and uncertainty reveals true character, providing reassurance to frightened children, supporting grieving family members, and maintaining dignity under difficult circumstances required extraordinary emotional strength. As the days passed, the journey became a symbol of perseverance in the face of adversity. The physical distance traveled was significant, but the emotional distance traveled may have been even greater. Moving from the immediate shock of tragedy toward the long process of remembrance and healing required patience that few people can fully understand. There is something deeply human about their experience that continues to resonate today. Every generation experiences its own forms of loss, uncertainty, and hardship. While circumstances differ, the emotions remain familiar. Fear, grief, hope, patience, and trust are experiences shared across cultures and across time. This is one reason why the events following Karbala continue to speak to people centuries later. The journey after Karbala reminds believers that the road following hardship is often long and difficult, but it is still possible to move forward with dignity and faith. Pain may remain, memories may continue to bring tears, and questions may remain unanswered. Yet the human spirit is capable of remarkable resilience when supported by faith and trust in Allah, even in moments when the future appears uncertain and the burden feels overwhelming. The examples left by those who endured these events continue to remind believers that patience and perseverance are never wasted. Every difficult journey eventually leaves behind lessons, wisdom, and examples that may guide and inspire others long after the journey itself has ended. One of the most remarkable aspects of the events that followed Karbala was the extraordinary courage, patience, and strength displayed by the surviving members of the family of the Prophet ﷺ during a period of unimaginable hardship. History often remembers bravery on the battlefield, but there is another form of bravery that receives less attention, yet requires immense strength. It is the courage to remain dignified in suffering, to hold firmly to faith during moments of grief, and to continue standing for truth when everything around you appears uncertain. The surviving members of the Prophet's household had already experienced the pain of witnessing the loss of beloved family members and companions. For many people, such an experience alone would have been enough to break their spirit. Yet what followed demanded even greater patience. The burden of grief had to be carried alongside the responsibility of protecting children, supporting one another, and preserving the message and lessons of Karbala for future generations. Among the figures whose courage is remembered throughout Islamic history is Zainab bint Ali. Her strength during these events became an example of resilience, wisdom, and steadfastness. Despite the enormous personal loss she had suffered, she continued to provide support and reassurance to those around her. Leadership during peaceful times can be relatively easy, but leadership during moments of fear, grief, and uncertainty reveals a person's true character. There are moments in history when individuals become symbols of values greater than themselves. Their actions speak not only to the people of their own time, but also to generations that follow. The courage displayed by the surviving family members became one of those examples. They showed that dignity does not depend on circumstances, and that faith can remain firm even during life's darkest moments. Patience in Islam has never meant remaining silent in the face of pain or pretending that suffering does not exist. The human heart naturally experiences sadness, grief, and loss. Even the prophets experienced moments of deep sorrow. What distinguishes patience is the refusal to allow hardship to destroy trust in Allah or to remove hope from the heart. The family members who survived Karbala demonstrated this understanding of patience with extraordinary strength. They mourned their losses and felt the pain of separation from loved ones, yet they continued to place their trust in Allah's wisdom and mercy. Their grief was real, but so was their faith. Many people misunderstand courage and imagine it as the absence of fear or sadness. In reality, courage often means continuing forward despite fear and sadness. It means carrying responsibilities while the heart feels heavy. It means supporting others while struggling with one's own pain. The survivors of Karbala embodied this form of courage in a way that continues to inspire believers centuries later. One of the most difficult aspects of hardship is uncertainty about the future. Human beings naturally seek stability and predictability. When these disappear, anxiety often takes their place. The surviving members of the family did not know exactly what awaited them in the days and weeks ahead. They faced an uncertain road, yet they continued moving forward with remarkable composure and trust in Allah. This trust did not emerge suddenly. It was rooted in years of faith, worship, and reliance upon Allah. Faith developed during times of comfort becomes a source of strength during times of difficulty. This is one of the reasons Islam places such importance on maintaining a relationship with Allah during all stages of life, and not only during moments of crisis. The events after Karbala also highlight the importance of preserving truth, even when doing so becomes difficult. History is often shaped not only by those who witness events, but also by those who choose to preserve their memory and share their lessons with others. Had the surviving family members remained silent, much of what later generations know about Karbala might never have reached them. Carrying painful memories and speaking about difficult experiences requires immense emotional strength. Many people who endure hardship prefer silence because remembering can reopen wounds that have not fully healed. Yet preserving important lessons often requires sacrifice. The survivors accepted this responsibility despite the emotional burden it carried. Their actions remind believers that truth sometimes requires patience and perseverance before it is fully recognized or understood. Immediate results are not always visible, but sincere efforts made for the sake of Allah often leave an impact far beyond what can be seen in the present moment. Another remarkable quality displayed during this period was compassion for others, despite personal suffering. Human beings experiencing grief often become consumed by their own pain, and this reaction is completely understandable. Yet the surviving members of the family continued caring for the children and supporting one another, despite carrying enormous emotional burdens themselves. This ability to think of others during moments of hardship is one of the highest forms of character. It reflects a heart that remains connected to values and principles, even when circumstances become overwhelming. Compassion shown during comfort is valuable, but compassion shown during suffering carries a unique beauty and significance. The experiences of these individuals also remind believers that hardship and honor are not opposites. Sometimes the people closest to Allah face some of the greatest tests. Difficulty is not necessarily a sign of rejection or abandonment. Many of the most beloved individuals in history experienced trials that shaped their character and elevated their status. This understanding changes the way believers view their own difficulties. Instead of seeing hardship only as something negative, they begin recognizing that trials can also become opportunities for growth, patience, and spiritual development. This does not remove the pain of suffering, but it provides meaning and purpose during difficult times. The courage displayed after Karbala was not the courage of physical strength alone. It was the courage to preserve dignity when humiliation might have seemed easier. The courage to maintain faith when despair might have appeared understandable, and the courage to continue carrying responsibility despite overwhelming grief. Many generations later, people continue to remember these events, not simply because of the tragedy itself, but because of the remarkable character shown by those who endured it. Their patience became a lesson in perseverance. Their faith became a lesson in trust. Their dignity became a lesson in character. Their strength became a reminder that human beings, with the help of Allah, are capable of enduring far more than they often imagine. The legacy they left behind continues to inspire people facing their own struggles today. Every person experiences moments of uncertainty, pain, and loss. While circumstances differ, the lessons of patience, faith, compassion, and resilience remain timeless. The examples shown by the family of the Prophet ﷺ after Karbala continue to remind believers that even during the most difficult chapters of life, it is possible to hold firmly to faith, preserve dignity, and continue moving forward with trust in Allah. The events that unfolded after Karbala left behind lessons that continue to touch hearts more than 13 centuries later. History contains countless battles, political struggles, and changes of power, yet very few moments have continued to inspire reflection across so many generations and across so many parts of the world. This is because the story of Karbala was never simply about a conflict between groups of people or a struggle for authority. At its heart, it became a reminder of faith, sacrifice, patience, justice, and perseverance in the face of overwhelming difficulty. One of the greatest lessons is that truth is not measured by numbers. Human beings often assume that strength belongs to those who possess larger armies, greater influence, or more resources. History repeatedly teaches us that moral strength and conviction can leave a legacy far greater than material power. There are moments when standing for principles becomes more important than personal comfort, and the events of Karbala became one of the most powerful examples of this reality. This lesson remains relevant in every generation. People continue to face situations where they must choose between convenience and principle, between silence and honesty, between doing what is easy and doing what is right. These decisions may not occur on battlefields, but they shape the character of individuals and communities every single day. A student may face pressure to compromise their integrity. A worker may be tempted to sacrifice honesty for personal gain. A person may remain silent when they should speak with wisdom and fairness. The lessons of history remind us that values become meaningful only when we are willing to uphold them during difficult moments. Another important lesson is the value of patience during hardship. Life rarely moves according to our plans. Every person eventually experiences loss, disappointment, uncertainty, or pain. During such moments, it becomes easy to believe that difficulties will last forever. The events after Karbala remind believers that patience does not mean the absence of sadness or grief. Rather, patience means carrying sorrow without allowing it to destroy faith or hope. Patience is one of the most difficult qualities to develop because it requires trust in outcomes we cannot yet see. Human beings naturally seek immediate answers and immediate relief. We want to know why things happen and when they will improve. Yet many of life's greatest lessons are learned during periods of waiting and uncertainty. Patience teaches humility because it reminds us that we do not control every aspect of our lives. The story also teaches the importance of perseverance. Some struggles are resolved quickly, while others continue for months or even years. During long periods of difficulty, people often become exhausted and lose motivation. Perseverance means continuing to move forward even when progress feels invisible. It means remaining committed to faith, family, and responsibility despite obstacles and disappointments. Many successful people in history reached their goals not because they avoided hardship, but because they refused to surrender to it. The same principle applies to spiritual life. A believer may experience moments of weakness, setbacks or failures, but perseverance means continuing to return to Allah and continuing to strive for improvement rather than giving up completely. Another lesson that stands out is the importance of dignity during hardship. Difficult situations have the power to reveal a person's character. Anyone can remain calm and gracious when life is easy, but true character often becomes visible during moments of pressure and pain. Maintaining dignity does not mean pretending that suffering does not exist. It means refusing to allow hardship to take away kindness, honesty, or faith. There is also an important lesson about sacrifice. Every meaningful achievement requires giving up something valuable. Parents sacrifice comfort for their children. Students sacrifice leisure for education. Communities sacrifice time and effort to build a better future. Sacrifice itself is a part of human life, but the question is always what we choose to sacrifice for and why we choose to do it. When sacrifice is connected to noble values and sincere intentions, it gains lasting significance. Human beings naturally admire those who place principles above personal gain, because such choices require courage and sincerity. Throughout history, societies have been shaped and improved by individuals willing to make sacrifices for the benefit of others. The events following Karbala also remind believers of the temporary nature of worldly life. Positions, wealth, influence, and status often appear permanent when viewed in the present moment, but history teaches otherwise. Generations come and go, governments rise and fall, and circumstances constantly change. What remains is character, faith, and the impact people leave behind through their actions. This understanding changes priorities. Instead of becoming completely absorbed by temporary achievements, believers are encouraged to focus on what carries lasting value. Acts of kindness, honesty, worship, service to others, and sincere intentions continue to matter long after material possessions disappear. Faith itself becomes one of the central lessons. Faith is easy when life unfolds according to expectations, but true faith often reveals itself during moments of uncertainty. Trusting Allah during ease is important, but trusting Him during hardship requires a deeper level of reliance and conviction. The people associated with these events demonstrated that faith can survive even the most difficult circumstances. Many people today struggle with questions during periods of hardship. Why did this happen? Why was this prayer delayed? Why did this opportunity disappear? Why does life sometimes feel unfair? These are deeply human questions that believers throughout history have asked. While not every question receives an immediate answer, faith teaches that wisdom exists even when human understanding is limited. Another timeless lesson is the importance of preserving history and learning from it. Historical events are not merely stories about people who lived long ago. They become mirrors through which we examine our own choices and values. When people forget history, they often repeat mistakes that previous generations already experienced. Reflection on the past helps individuals develop wisdom for the future. The lessons of Karbala continue to inspire discussions about justice, compassion, courage, patience, and moral responsibility, because these values remain relevant regardless of time or place. Human societies continue to face challenges that require wisdom, fairness, and integrity. The examples left behind continue to provide guidance and inspiration for people seeking to live with purpose and faith. Perhaps one of the most beautiful lessons is that hardship does not have the final word. Pain can leave scars, but it can also produce strength, wisdom, and resilience. Difficult chapters may become the source of growth that shapes the rest of a person's life. Trials may reveal qualities within us that comfort would never have uncovered. Every generation discovers its own connection to these lessons, because every generation experiences struggle in different forms. Some face personal losses, others face uncertainty about the future, and others carry burdens that remain hidden from those around them. The lessons that emerged from the events after Karbala continue to remind believers that patience, faith, dignity, and perseverance remain among the greatest strengths a person can possess. If you found this reminder beneficial and would like to continue exploring Islamic history and inspiring lessons from the past, please subscribe to my channel and share this message with others so that together we can continue learning, reflecting, and growing in faith and understanding.